Welcome back to the Splash Live, Greater West Bloomfield's live daily news and talk show. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Diane Chabon. We're getting closer and closer to the kickoff of high school football season as well as college football season. And hey, look, in recent years, a lot of success on the gridiron for the West Bloomfield Lakers, as well as our other local schools like St. Mary's, and those in neighboring areas of the greater West Bloomfield community as well. So we're starting to see those players playing on Saturday and on Sundays, guys like Matthew Judon in the NFL, and I know many more to come in recent years, including some recent graduates from West Bloomfield High School. We're expected to have bigger roles in 2023 and 2024 on the college football side at major programs all throughout Division I. Joining us now to talk about these players and the expectations behind them this season is Civic Center TV sports reporter Matt Catoni, who will also be your color commentator for West Bloomfield High School football this season, with our first broadcast coming up in just a couple of weeks as the Lakers kick off their OAA season and a cross-division matchup with the Birmingham Groves Falcons. Matt, thanks for being with us.
Hi, Tyler. Thank you for having me. And as you mentioned, a lot of these athletes at the next level are looking to expand upon success they've already have, or even just make a name for themselves now that they're at the next level. One of these guys is Dillon Tatum for Michigan State. Last year, it was his freshman year there, and he kind of was forced into the lineup unexpectedly when their cornerbacks and defensive back room depth was tested. And he spoke recently about how he learned tremendously from being thrown in the fire last year and how it's helped him with not just, making him a better football player, but making him a better mentor for the younger guys behind him.
Yeah, Dillon Tatum expected to have a big season, a big role this year at Michigan State. Hey, they're coming up on celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the no-fly zone team, the Rose Bowl winning team. They'll celebrate them in September in their home game against the Washington Huskies, soon to be a Big Ten rival. And as we think about the no-fly zone era, perhaps the next big guy to come in with that sort of a role is Dillon Tatum, an exceptional nickelback and safety at West Bloomfield High School, and expected to be in a similar role this season for Michigan State, looking to make a huge improvement, which doesn't really you're not really saying much in that regard from their secondary last season. But Dillon Tatum going to be a huge part of that, and at that school down the road in Ann Arbor, your school, Matt Catoni, the University of Michigan. Makari Paige in a similar role for the University of Michigan, going to be starting for them at safety and also going to be playing a key role for them. Big expectations behind Makari Paige this year, not just at the University of Michigan, but on a nationwide level.
Yeah, last year was already an impressive enough season as it was. His 71 tackles, 48 solo, and 4 interceptions his solo tackles and interceptions were both team highs. He became just the second Wolverine since 2000 to reach 70 tackles and 4 interceptions in a single season. That type of play has got him on the preseason watch list for the Bronco Nagurski Defensive Player of the Year award. And it's really exciting to see what he might be doing this fall for Michigan this year, because it really could be special.
Yeah, that Michigan defense was excellent a season ago. Going to be a big year for them also, with national championship level expectations for them coming in. A lot of the early season polls have Michigan at number 2 in the country, looking like they are the presumptive favorite to win the Big Ten. Again, of course, it's going to be a lot of expectations are it's going to come down to that big game against Ohio State, this time in Ann Arbor in late October, to determine whether or not Michigan's going to be playing for the Big Ten title and presumably for a national championship. And Makari Paige, one of those guys that at his time in West Bloomfield was always a high impact player that made a lot of big plays for West Bloomfield, but also kind of had that Tim Duncan sense to him, a San Antonio Spur, a basketball player that was always very prolific at what he did, great at his craft, but not necessarily someone that's going to be always getting the spotlight on him and getting the praise that he deserves. So good news out of Ann Arbor on that front. One of our more recent stars at West Bloomfield High School, Semaj Morgan, also making big waves in Ann Arbor as he gets ready to begin his freshman season, impressing some of that coaching staff in these preseason practices, Matt.
Yeah, Semaj Morgan has been tremendous thus far for Michigan. He's even drawing some attention from Harbaugh, who said he's quick, fast, and shorter stature, but has a very big catch radius. He can catch the balls away from his body. He can high point. He's been pretty good for them so far. And that Harbaugh even said that a lot of the stuff that you see from him, especially his ability to get out of a break, stuff is something that he hasn't seen from a lot of players in general, let alone a freshman. So he's
Yeah, it's
certainly,
been tough in recent years. It's tough in recent years, Matt, for the University of Michigan to recruit high-level wide receiver talent. You think about those top 100 rankings in that position, or top 100 players in the country at the wide receiver position, but perhaps could be the steal of recent years, picking up a guy like Semaj Morgan for that offense, replacing some really critical wide receiver talent from recent years that have graduated or moved on to other institutions.
Yeah, and I think that Semaj brings us something different to the table. Like a lot of the receivers that Michigan has had in recent years, like Ronnie Bell, DPJ, they're sort of like stronger in stature and bigger than Semaj. But whereas Semaj is kind of this new generation type wide receiver that's shorter in stature but can make you miss, but is still able to make any catch with any cornerback.
And we know that Jim Harbaugh likes to get creative with his offense. So was the case for Ron Bellamy as head coach at West Bloomfield High School. And we also know that skill set of Semaj Morgan kind of similar to Donovan Edwards, where he can play pretty much any position on that offense outside of the offensive line, although they definitely would give that the old college try. In this case, pun absolutely intended. So we could perhaps see Semaj Morgan maybe in the backfield a little bit on those screen passes or in a slot receiver position, or could be a guy that if he gets some significant wide receiver time on the outside, could be someone you use the speed of, use the athleticism of to take on some of those less athletic, so to speak, safeties and cornerbacks and take advantage of those defenses. Semaj Morgan could be a huge underrated player in this Michigan offense in 2023. Outside of the Big Ten, Cornell Wheeler, a former Michigan Wolverine himself and West Bloomfield Laker alum, getting some praise as well on the gridiron at the University of Kansas, looking like it could be a big year for Cornell for Kansas.
Yeah, he's entering an additional season there, another year with the coaching staff, and they seem very satisfied with the progress he's made. Their head coach stating that, I thought he had a good spring and he's really starting to show up again. So their head coach, Leopold, really thinks highly of how he's performing so far. And his position coaches talked about how he increased his knowledge to just go with his natural feel for the game already, which has just made him that much better of a linebacker as he already was.
Yeah, Kansas coming into this season and having really grown that program pretty well in past years and starting to develop a solid football program out there, and the defense playing a huge role in that. So hopefully a big year ahead for number 44, Cornell Wheeler, a West Bloomfield High School alum in his own right. Now, outside the gridiron, some other news happening in our local area from Greater West Bloomfield School alumni are happening over at Orchard Lake St. Mary's High School, where one of their legendary players from the early aughts and the early 2000s, Jeff Petrie, coming home to the Detroit Red Wings this week after a trade with the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is a guy that had a big career at Orchard Lake St. Mary's and now getting a chance to come home and play for his hometown team.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, he's from the area. He's the son of 1984 Tigers legend Dan Petrie, who I'm sure everyone here is familiar with from the Tigers games. But the 35-year-old was traded to the Red Wings, and they gave up Gustav Lindstrom and a fourth-round pick, and aren't really responsible for that much of his salary, only having to take 50% of the contract that runs through the 2024-2025 season. And he's
helping to fill some of those gaps on the fill some of those gaps on the defensive side and also some scoring depth too.
Yeah, that's really what I think Yzerman's been going for this entire offseason. I think Petrie just speaks to that and will just build upon that. He gives them tremendous depth on the defensive front, and that's kind of what you've seen Yzerman try and do over the past few years with the Red Wings, just kind of build solid depth and not necessarily go after big stars, just fill out the entire roster.
Yeah, we're seeing the Red Wings start to turn that corner a little bit from an on-paper standpoint, adding more veteran talent. Also, Farmington Hills native Alex DeBrincat being traded for earlier on in the season, a star that this team desperately needed to add to their roster alongside guys like another local guy in Dillon Larkin, and now having Jeff Petrie on the roster. So not necessarily intentionally building a team with a lot of local guys, but a lot of local talent happening to make their way back home to the Detroit area to play for the Red Wings, and some good news from athletes all across our local area as we get ready to head into football season. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Give us the latest update.
Yeah, thank you for having me.